I wanted the gaze to be different. I didn't want to over explain anything. I just wanted you to sit with, feel with. Yeah, you might not know all of the things or all of the references, but the point is like you can track her emotional journey and you feel her discomfort.
What's good? I'm Nikisha Elise Williams, and this is Black and Published, bringing you the journeys of writers, poets, playwrights, and storytellers of all kinds. Today's guest is Liv Little, author of the novel Rosewater, a book she says was driven by the transformational force of love in her life.
I believe that like compassion is like the foundation to like a beautiful, beautiful love story, right? And so for me, this was a book that calls for compassion, of understanding, of listening, of watching, of observing, and stepping back, you know, without our own assumptions.
Liv, a Black queer woman of Jamaican and Guyanese descent who lives in South London, gave her ethnic background to her main character, Elsie. But make no mistake, this is not memoir masquerading as fiction. Why she was dedicated to illustrating the ways Black, queer, and femme communities show up and support one another. Plus, the reason she said it was important to explore the roots of homophobia and heteronormativity and how it's weaponized against queer communities. And the reason Liv made sure her heroine's journey of self-discovery was one filled with friendship, love, and sex. That and more is next, when Black and Published continues. So Liv, when did you know that you were a writer?
It's funny, like my mum says that she knew I was a writer from the age of like 4 or something, because my mum's a Buddhist and she used to be part of this like Buddhist magazine that they have, and I'd sit in the editorial meetings and she was like, you were always so interested and I could just tell you're going to be a writer. But I think that's one of those things that your mum says, right? In terms of when I knew, I think probably around the time that I went to uni, really. I think I studied politics and sociology, and I was writing a lot on migration and women's rights. And I think I realized that like the style in which I write is one that I hope would be able to be read by more people than like within that kind of academic space. And I think I sometimes didn't love the pretentiousness in which, you know, certain things have to be written. I of course, give me description, give me like all of that beautiful stuff that makes you fall in love with writing. But I think I want people to also be able to understand what it is that I'm saying without requiring translation. And so I think that was when I was like, okay, maybe journalism, maybe like writing in other forms is actually the kind of writing that I should be doing. I think it was at that stage.
So then did you always like try to stick to nonfiction, or did you ever try creative nonfiction or fiction or anything like that?
In the beginning, it was really non-fiction, and I was working in TV as well, and it was all in like factual and documentary. And I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to tell stories in this like very specific way. And I think over time, I started to find a lot more freedom and joy and excitement in creative fiction and all of that. Like that was where I was like, oh my God, I feel so alive. I feel so free. And I feel so able to still make points or to express themes and topics that are important to me, but in a way which can be entertaining, which can make people laugh, make people feel, and allow people to feel without telling them what is wrong and what is right. Actually just like sit and live with this character or sit and live in this other world. And I think that's not to say I'll never write anything ever again, but the only journalistic pieces that I really love to write tend to be profiles, and that's because they're very like characterful. It's all about getting to know the person and understanding why they move through the world in the way that they do, and that really translates in fiction, you know, and especially with my first novel, which is very much kind of like a slice of life. You're in this character's experience.
So then knowing that you always really enjoyed storytelling once you got into it through journalism and then doing television and things like that, when did you know that, you know what, I think I want to write a book?
Yeah, I think I'd known for a while actually. But with me, it's always like, because I like to work in so many different mediums, it's always, rather than being led by, I need to write a book, so I'm going to think about an idea for a book, it's more like, what is the idea that comes to me and in which format do I want to tell it? And I always have like quite a clear instinct for how that happens. And like The first time that I thought, okay, novel writing could be something that is for me, I sat down and I approached it in a way which was quite formulaic, and it didn't end up being the book that is Rosewater. It's completely different. And I realized, actually, I need to take time, sit back. I kind of readjusted how I worked, how I lived, and like put myself in a position where I had time to think and to sit and to just feel. And when I did that, however many years later, then the idea of Rosewater really presented itself to me. And I think because for me, love is such a transformational force within my life, it spoke to that kind of fundamentally. And I knew that this is something that I wanted to write in novel form.
What was it about this love story that said, this is the book that I have to write?
I mean, for me, I wanted to read a queer, messy love story. I wanted to read one that was like romantic, but not necessarily a rom-com. I wanted to write one which felt honest and true to the ways in which people are complicated and the way that our experiences of love, you know, we're all a product of our environment and how we've been raised, and also, you know, ancestrally, all of that sort of stuff is really important. And so I wanted to write something that really interrogated someone's ability to even be open to love, to fall in love, to be scared of love, to fear vulnerability, and to like map out that journey. I knew what I wanted to write, and I knew that I also wanted to write a very strong character who like knows who she is, even if the world doesn't make space for her. She's not insecure about her blackness, she's not insecure about her queerness, she knows who she is. I also really wanted to write a book where it was about two protagonists, two love interests who are black. I didn't want to write it in relation to whiteness, you know. I wanted to write a book that kind of reflected the experience of love maybe that I'm having. Those were the things that were important to me. And again, it was like I didn't want to over explain anything. I just wanted you to sit with, feel with. Yeah, you might not know all of the things or all of the references, but the point is like you can track her emotional journey and you feel her discomfort. That's the thing of why I wrote this in first person. I really wanted you to feel the immediacy of Elsie's experience, of her pain, of like the stress when we meet her when she's being evicted, of, you know, I want people to sit in all of those different, and the sexiness and the like fear and the like moments of preemptive grief. I wanted you to really just sit in it as you're reading it. And I wrote it from my heart, and I hope people can feel that this is a book that has a lot of love in it.
As you're talking, I'm seeing how you're very animated about the kind of story that you wanted to tell. And again, as you're speaking, immediately what came to mind is that famous Toni Morrison quote that if there is a book that you want to read that does not exist, you must write it. And so with that being the setup, was it important for you to write this queer, Black love story because there was not a contemporary book where you saw yourself?
Yeah, interesting. I think one author in particular whose work I did read and I love so much and is just beautiful on every level was when I read Here Comes the Sun by Nicole Dennis Benn. And I picked it up and I didn't actually know what it was going to be about at all. And I'm like Caribbean, I'm half Guyanese, half Jamaican. My protagonist here is Guyanese. She writes these about Black queer Jamaican women, which is her as well. And reading that book, and also Patsy, but at that point, it was just Here Comes the Sun. I was like, wow. It was like this moment where I was like, I'm definitely not these characters, but it was the first time, I suppose, in a really contemporary way that I had read an experience that felt close to mine. So I fell in love with it, and I fell in love with her as an author. And so I think our books are not the same or anything like that. But I think in terms of like the inspiration or like knowing that it was possible for me to create something that spoke to my experience, or not even my experience, but the world maybe as I see it, actually, I think that was like a really good inspiration. And then, you know, like Bernadine has done that with Golem and other, like there are like different kinds of Black women and queerness represented. But I think in terms of like a story with like a working class protagonist growing up in South London, which is, you know, a place that I love and that has nurtured me and that I am the way that I am because of that place. And a sexy book that explored different forms of intimacy and what that tells us about where Elsie is. I think, yeah, I did write the book that I wanted to read. And I didn't want to necessarily read another experience of someone who perhaps is like more embedded within the arts and has done the uni thing and has like, you know, I wanted the gaze to be different.
You said you wanted the gaze to be different. And I think for Black authors, the question is always, is the white gaze too apparent in the work? For you writing a queer love story, and also writing a Black queer love story, did you feel like you were trying to make sure that you weren't having to over explain for people who were not queer identifying and coming to this work and just being like, this is a piece of life that you may not know, but you're going to get into it and you're going to adapt, or you're going to go Google something?
Yeah, I also just think like that the themes of like figuring out who you are, or finding your place, of feeling maybe like you don't fit in and searching for home and belonging, and also trying to search and understand parts of yourself that enables you to move through the world in a way where you're open to the possibility of love. I think those are like human experiences. So I would hope that people can meet my work on that level. And yeah, I'm thinking about the book that I want to write for myself. I'm not the sort of like writer who's ever going to be thinking, and I know that there is an expectation or like that there can be a tendency to like favor books that do sit in a space where the Blackness is explained explicitly and the references are explained explicitly, and maybe the love is still rooted in something that, you know, is outside of that, which again is so valid. But I think for me, that's not who I am, and that's not how I move through the world. Like, the humanness, the emotional connection should be enough that you shouldn't feel uncomfortable at reading about an experience that is outside of us. And if you are, I also just don't really care.
So taking that, that attitude in mind, when did you finish the novel? And then what was your publication process like?
I was writing this book in a year when my dad was dying and I was looking after him, and it was like the worst year of my life. But this book held so much joy for me. It was such a place where I could just go and I could write and I could just be creative. And so I think that's why I was able to write it so quickly, actually. I wrote it over the course of a year, or I finished it within a year. Then obviously once we, I edited it and then it got acquired, then we edited it a lot more. But yeah, it was relatively quick. In the beginning, I went somewhere in nature and I wrote for like a week to kind of like break the story. And then like after that, it was wherever, whenever. I just knew that I wanted to write. And I'd also made this decision where I was like, I quit my job and I want to exist in another space. And so it was like, yeah, you also need to write the book because you got to write the book. You have to finish it. Like you're working for yourself, I guess. I mean, I was kind of working for myself before, but in a different context. And so I finished the book and then I edited it with my literary agent.
What year was this?
It must have been 2021, because that was the year that I got the deal and stuff. So yeah, but like towards the end of the year, yeah, then we had a process of like obviously going out and seeing if anyone wants it. And yeah, then we went out with it and then it got preempted. I had a couple of great offers and I knew who I was going to go with, really. And that was it. And I'm fortunate in a way that I was published by one of the few Black-led publishers in the UK, and someone who I have known and who's actually supported my career for a long time, and who just gets it, who is close to where I'm from in Jamaica, who's a South Londoner, who just understood and who understands me actually, and so therefore understood what I was trying to do with the work. And so I think that was great. And my US editor was actually also phenomenal. So, it all worked really bloody well. It was like perfect. Honestly, it's been an amazing experience,
Yeah. Can you talk more about when you say like, instead of like pushing to go to an auction and trying to make the deal get bigger and run the price up, because that's what that really does, about, what it was that you were looking for in an editor, in a publishing house, in the next steps of your literary career, and how that knowing came to you?
Yeah, I think for me, I want to surround myself with people, and this applies to like, as I'm doing some work in TV now and also like film, is that I want to always surround myself with teams, with, whether that's development producers or publishers, whoever it is, but people that are really going to challenge me, that are really going to push me, that are really going to not just be like, oh, Liv, you're amazing, it's great. That energy is not helpful for me. I don't want to meet someone that's just like, no. I want someone that's like, okay, this is what I like about this, but these are the things that I think you can really push. And like most of the time when they're delivering the feedback or the challenge, I'm like, yeah, I know, I agree, or okay, interesting, that makes me think about this in another way. Of course, you're allowed to like hear a note, take in the note, digest the note, and be like, actually, this is how I feel about that note. But I think for me, someone who understands like the heart of what it is that I'm trying to say with a particular piece of work, because there's the world, there's the story, but like you can distill it to like a single message that's speaking to something. That's important to me. That understands the lens and the gaze through which like I want to tell the stories that I want to tell. And that is also that's gonna push me. Like, and if you're not gonna do those things, then I can't trust you, you know? I need to be able to trust the people that I'm working with. And, you know, I've had experiences working with people who maybe at first I think that they're gonna be able to do that, and then they don't. But actually, you know, I feel like I'm kind of like finding my feet in terms of that when it comes to figuring out who those people are on my kind of the next projects that I'm working on. And that is really exciting. You know, I met a producer who I'm working on like a short with at the moment, and she's just fucking fab. And she was like, yeah, well, this bit feels a bit forced. And I was like, yeah, it does feel a bit forced, doesn't, like, you know, those are the kind of conversations. As much as it's like, okay, so we've got to go back, I'd rather go back a million times and produce something that I know in my heart of hearts I love and I'm so proud of, than rushing something through for the sake of it. For me personally, I really actually need to work in the way that I'm working now, which is much slower, much more deliberate, and about getting so deep into the research, into the psyche of these characters, into the world. It's like anyone that wants to help me do those things in a way which, like I said, is about challenge as well as support. Of course, the support needs to be there too. I think that for me is what I look for.
Okay, so then with all of that said, and producing this novel that challenged you and pushed you to make it the best that you could, let's get into the book. Have you read a little something from it, and then we can talk about Elsie and her shenanigans.
Not shenanigans.
Rosewater by Liv Little follows Elsie, who is an aspiring poet, on what begins as the worst day of her life. She's evicted from her public housing apartment and has nowhere to turn but to her best friend, who she won't admit she has a crush on. In this multi-generational queer love story, Liv explores what it means to live a life unashamed and unapologetic for who you are in a world that isn't designed for you. Here's Liv.
Okay, I'll do like a little bit from the beginning, I think, which is maybe quite nice. The first thing she does is squeeze me tight. My eyes glaze with a thin layer of water. She's here for the first time in months. Juliet looks past me into the flat to one of the men who, upon hearing the door, reinstates his initial position in my hallway. Her eyes move then to the boxes on the floor, all without letting go of me. I want to stay in her arms, but we have to first maneuver all my belongings into her bedraggled green Mini. It's about to be written off, but her grandma left the car to her after she died. So Juliet refuses to get rid of it. Who are they? Juliet whispers into my ear, her curly hair sticking momentarily to my warm, damp cheeks, a combination of sweat and tears. Bailiffs. I gulp down the shame. We have 10 minutes to get everything into your car, then they're locking the door. I can see Juliet's brain kicking into gear, just like it used to when we were 12, and she concocts some witty comeback that would disarm wannabe bullies in the playground. Though the look on her face is serious now, more brutal than usual. I'll put the backseat down and we'll get everything in. Don't you worry, Els. Releasing me from her tender perfume squeeze, she picks up the heaviest box with her thin but capable arms, and without complaint walks it out to the door and toward the lift. I follow with a lighter box, disregarding the bailiffs who are looking from us to their watches and back again. After 6 efficient laps, everything is inside the lift, which Juliet has wedged open with the biggest box. We're both sticky with sweat from the end of summer heat. Juliet has her hair pulled back, and there's a sheen covering her nose, cheekbones, and forehead. Her honeyed skin is glowing, and I realize how much I've missed her. Even after everything, she's here.
Thank you. The book opens on what has to be the worst day of anybody's life. I don't think it's a spoiler to say the main character is being evicted. She has nowhere to go. She's kind of estranged from her family, and her best friend shows up as best friends are supposed to, to help her out. And the story kind of takes off from there, and we delve deep into Elsie's life, into Juliet's life, into their messiness, because they're best friends, but there's an attraction that they're not acting on.
Mm.
And Elsie's like a struggling poet. Where did all of this come from for you to ground it into these two women and anchor the story around not just their friendship, but what could be in their lives as lovers?
I mean, so many things, really. Drawing on a lot of things here. I mean, firstly, I always fall in love with girls or people who write poetry. So that's probably where that comes from. But also, as I was saying earlier, writing really strong, but really like distinct characters. Juliet's no like wallflower either. She knows who she is, sometimes in a way which is somewhat overbearing. But I wanted to write these two characters who, despite coming from two very different worlds with two very different lived experiences, love each other and try to show up for each other. But I wanted to show the different ways in which sometimes they just don't quite get it, right? And sometimes they do really get it, and that's really beautiful. But I wanted to get into the complicated nature of being friends with or being in love with someone who maybe cannot 100% relate to what it is that you're going through, despite trying to show up. And I wanted to explore what that looks and what that feels like, and what does it look and feel like for someone. You know, I don't know, me personally, I often struggle to ask for help. and I know that like a lot of Black women often struggle to ask for help. Elsie particularly struggles to ask for help because she's had to be independent from a young age. And so what does that look like? What does that feel like in terms of her literally as someone who's been so capable and so self-sufficient and really is very capable and self-sufficient? It's not that she's not able to do those things, it's that the world is not set up to support maybe an Elsie. You know, yes, there are lots of decisions that Elsie makes that like might not seem like they make sense, but I want, through you understanding where she's at and where she's come from, understanding why she might make choices that might seem contrary to what is in her best interest. It's not like she's just this wayward person who has no regard for anything. It's that actually a lot of the time, like, she's scared and she feels like she has to hold it together, even if she's pretending that she's okay, you know? And this is about her learning to stop pretending, and it's about being able to drop her guard. But she's lived in the defense for so long that is going to be a long and slow process. And I mean, the book happens over a couple of months, so it's not like a massive amount of time. But she starts to uncover things about herself, and we have a hint that, you know, they're going to be together or try to make something of it. But we also know, having watched them for however many months, that it's going to be fucking hard, and they're probably both going to make mistakes. And I wanted to leave people in that kind of sense of feeling. But yeah, all of the mess, all of the lack of understanding between them, it was those things. And actually for me, it's like a message behind why I wanted to have these two women who are so different, was because I believe that like compassion is like the foundation to like a beautiful, beautiful love story, right? And so for me, this was a book that calls for compassion, of understanding, of listening, of watching, of observing, and stepping back, you know, without our own assumptions. So yeah.
In examining what you said about how it's hard for Elsie to ask for help in a world that is not set up for her to succeed, what I noticed a lot of then is she was making choices where I was just like, girl, what? Like, why? That it almost seemed like she was trying to dig out of shame and embarrassment, which also looked like self-sabotage. And her only real outlet was sex. Yeah, she gave off like fuck girl energy.
Yeah, no, yeah, she does, because but that for her is easy. And a lot of the time that you see the relationships that she's having, like, it's not about building like deep connection. It's about her feeling powerful in that space, and that's like a space where she reliably feels powerful, like when she's lacking power in other elements of her life. And so yeah, in the worst moment when maybe she shouldn't be going on a date, she's going on a date because that's the thing that she knows might give her a little rush of like, I feel strong, or I feel like I got this. I know how to make this person feel good. But then it shifts when she sleeps with like Juliet, for example, and even B, it's like, okay, what do I need? What's going to make me feel good, you know? And that's really like speaking to the rest of the book. Like it was never like sex for sex sake. I wanted to try and map the different kinds of sex she has with different people and what that tells you about her emotional state, how she sees herself, and also what that relationship is or isn't going to be. You know, when she sleeps with Juliet, it's much more like reciprocal in a way. And that's important to note.
And you mentioned that. And then one of the other main relationships that she has besides with Juliet is with her coworker B, who is, I guess, kind of straight, or at least is going to be straight.
I
And
don't
like,
think she's straight. I think it's hard for her to picture herself not ending up in the traditional family
yeah,
unit that she
like
thought that
she's
she needs to be
deciding
in.
to be, she's going to pretend to be straight as if she doesn't like women. Like she has a boyfriend and then they're going to make a life and do the heterosexual thing and family and kids and all of
Which is
that.
also valid. And she, you know, I don't really label anyone's sexuality, but I assume they're all some variation on being like queer, right?
Yeah.
But it's like the fact that you assume fundamentally that that could never be. It's fine if that's not what you want, but if you assume fundamentally that can never be whilst you're laying down with Elsie, you're in bed together. That even though it's casual, they are friends and they do have a relationship, you know, which is beyond that form of intimacy. So it stings when she makes that comment to Elsie about, yeah, but I'd obviously never marry a woman. It's not even like Elsie's necessarily someone who is like saying we must all get married. It's not about that. It's about her denying the fact that that could even be a possibility. But it's like also, again, like everyone's relationship to queerness and their journey to acceptance of that or whatever is very different. And so I wanted there to be like a difference within these different women's relationship to queerness without explaining it either necessarily.
Yes, because I mean, Juliet is in a similar situation where I guess if I had to put a label on her at all, it would be pansexual, where she's open, so she'll date men, she'll date women, it's whatever. But with the character of B, why was it important for you to explore, I guess, her rigidity and resistance to accepting this side of herself that, you know, I'll mess around, but, you know, we can't make it official or anything like that?
I think because it's very real. And I think because that really is and can be an experience. And I think what I wanted to do was to explore how, like, as queer people, we can often like internalize structures of like heteronormativity because that's what we are raised under. So I think even for me, I think parenthood is something that I do want to do, for example, but I think the way I'm having to really ask myself questions about like the ways in which I view my life and the things that I need to or feel like I should do in my life. And I think when I first even was in a relationship with my partner, I was like, yeah, and so I get married here and then like, well, I have the kids here and like it has to be like that. And then you grow up and you evolve and you shift and you start to realize and hopefully ask yourself questions about, is that what I want? Why do I want it? It's okay if I want those things, but like, why do I want it? You know? And so I suppose through B, I was wanting to explore those ways in which we can internalize those things and like, you know, in the relationships that we're having that don't even exist, that don't necessarily exist within that gaze.
Okay. And then your problematic character, Juliet dates him for a little bit, Andrew. Is he homophobic? Because he worked my nerves. Like the tit for tat that him and Elsie have, I was just like, dude,
but you
like
know, he is awful, and obviously, like, you know, what he ends up doing is awful. But it's also like, in a way, like him and Elsie both have so much ego at a point that they're like arguing over this person who actually has her own autonomy. So it's like they're both of them in the beginning. Both of them are like doing this thing of like, you know,
it's pissing match.
Yeah, literally. I was trying to find like a polite way of saying it. That's perfect.
Sometimes you can't be polite. And
I was like,
it's a pissing match.
yeah. But it's like it was very that. Like a lot of the reason that he moves to the world and that he does, because he's a like deeply insecure person. Like he's a deeply insecure person. And there's no excuse for like the behavior and what happens later on. But like the root of that is his own insecurity and need to be in control, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So given those situations, relationships, and the characters that you've created where you're exploring how heteronormativity tries to enforce itself on people who dare to live differently, often to, in the case of your book, sometimes violent outcomes, even if they are not necessarily intended. There's real harm done to both Elsie and Juliet, and even some of the other characters in the book that populate the world. What is it that you want to say at a time, especially in America? I don't know about the UK, but especially in America, where there is so much vitriol and hate and violence and harm that is lobbed and lodged on and against the queer community, and it only continues to stoke those negative fires.
No, I mean, I think that applies here as well. It's a very scary time, and one in which we're living under a very like conservative government, and rights are being scaled back, and all of those things are very real. I think, as I said before, I wasn't writing this for anyone other than myself or like the girlies that I'm really like, yes, I want you to love it. But having said that, like for me, my approach and the reason why I'm enjoying fiction and the reason why I wanted to tell this book in first person was because I wanted people to step into Elsie's world, to experience things through her lens. I'm not going to say to you that the reason why I'm not going to explicitly explain that, the gentrification that is happening like within Peckham is due to but I'm going to show you, and like you're going to be able to understand what it is that I'm showing you without me explicitly having to tell you. I don't need to explain what is going on in the opening chapter in terms of like housing instability. I'm just showing you, and you're feeling it. You're feeling the discomfort, right? And so for me, that was my approach with this book. And you're also going to feel all the other moments of joy and of celebration and of like queer community and of support. And I map a lot of spaces within the book, like Prim Black. I speak about musicians. I speak about artists like Shola Ololode, like within this book, who are really important and to me transformative kind of facets within the queer community, specifically within the UK today. I think one of the things that is so sad about like queer history, and again something that I'm like looking at with another kind of bigger project I'm working on, but is like the lack of archival material of queer stories. It's like I want to create something that speaks to the moment in which it was written, and that you can step into and feel like you have an understanding of Elsie's world at the time. And that's my way of doing it with this specific piece of work. And actually, it's a love letter to the Elsies and the reason why I'm able to show up and make the work that I am. It's all of those things. And same with the grandma and her journey with her queerness, and actually being able to map how that looks different for her to Elsie, and how we're all intertwined. No, they're not family, but they are family. And so for me, it was like, this is like the biggest hug and the biggest kind of like love letter to queer Black women. Like at the end of the day, that's how I choose to show up for, show love for, show appreciation for. Really, it's about appreciation and gratitude for this kind of incredible community who, yes, it exists like in the face of so much adversity, because often you feel like the first to ever experience a certain kind of thing, but then when you start to engage in dialogue, you realize that there's so much to be drawn from others who have come before and who've been doing the work, but maybe the internet didn't document it in the way that it documents the work that we're doing now.
You also said you didn't write this for anyone but yourself and the girlies who you really wanted who you really wanted to feel your work. So what do you want the girlies to get from Rosewater?
What do I want the girlies to feel? I want the girlies to, you know what? I don't ever want to tell people exactly what I want them to feel from my work, but I want them to feel something. Whether that's like sadness, whether that's stress, whether that is horniness, whatever realization or feeling that comes from it, I'm here for. I would be sad if you read it and it didn't make you feel or think about anything, or have an opinion, or be critical of and engage with, whatever. I just want you to be really in. I want you to be really in Elsie's world and in the work, and let's talk about it. I love talking about it.
All right. So I want to switch to a speed round in the game before I let you go for the afternoon. What is your favorite book?
Oh my God. That is so hard. I'm going to say Here Comes the Sun, I'm gonna say Here Comes the Sun. It's one of my favorite books. I'm gonna say that. But there's loads and I feel stressed. But let's do that.
Okay. Who is your favorite author?
Well, because I've just said Nicole Dennis Benn's book, she's one of my favorite authors. Bernardine Evaristo, especially her earlier books, Mr. Loverman, The Emperor's Babe, they're some of my favorite books. So yeah, let's say Bernadine. Let's say Auntie Bernadine.
Okay. And because you mentioned casually that you have a thing for folks who do poetry, who is your favorite poet?
Oh, you know what? And this is a really like contemporary choice, and I'm biased because I've just interviewed her about this poetry collection, but I do think it's incredibly special and it made me emotional and made me feel all the things and be so deeply moved. But Arlo Parks, the musician, has just written a book called The Magic Border, and it's so special. So special. And it like incorporates photography as well. I feel like it's a project that allows you to sit with and explore. So let's say Arlo for that.
Okay. Because you've worked in lots of different mediums, what do you think is the best book to movie or TV series adaptation?
Oh, fab. Okay. Honestly, and I mean, maybe this is like an easy one, or like a obvious one, but I just think it was perfect, was the adaptation of Sally Rooney's Normal People. I think it's phenomenal. I think I actually kind of preferred the adaptation to the book, but it really captures so well that like intense teenage love thing. And like the thing that I love about that is that it's like, so this is what I was talking about, like people should, whether it's their experience or not, they should be able to come away from it feeling like they can take something away. And that is rooted so in a specific world, age, demographic, community, all the rest of it. And yet it's so incredibly universal. And so I think it was, and the casting was amazing. And I just think it's a beautiful series that I kind of return to again and again.
If money were no object, where would you go? What would you do? And where would you live?
You see me now, it's like I could say like loads of like really tropical places, and I'm like Caribbean and I love being in Jamaica and etc. etc. But if I'm not next to my like people, I'm like, what's the point? So if I could move everyone, I'd go to Jamaica, and if not, I would probably just end up back in South London, to be fair.
And what would you be doing?
Making films, making art. Like I feel like regardless of how much money I theoretically have, I'd want to remain curious about the world. It would mean that I could work slower, which would be amazing. But I think I'd still be wanting to tell stories and like collaborate with people.
What brings you joy?
I love feeding people. I love feeding people. I love tending to my garden with my herbs and my vegetables. I love that. Food is such a big part of Rosewater as well, but it's such a big part of like, and I know for so many Black people and Caribbean people, etc., it is like the way that you show love. Like my grandma is the one who, you know, the roti, the curry, all the Guyanese stuff, the pepper pot. And when my mum and auntie were vegan, like temporarily, she was so upset, like actually heartbroken, because she was like, this is how I show you love, because vegetarian cooking is not like her thing. It was like quite upsetting. And I think for me, that's how I feel about food and about cooking. And so wherever I travel, whatever country I go to, I like will do a cooking class with like a local auntie, because I want to like get to understand why they love food, you know, and take a bit of that back with me into my cooking. But I'm in my kitchen now, and that's like, it's my favorite place. So yeah.
So with that said, what is the best meal you've ever had? The mouth drop.
Oh, honestly, my favorite meal, and it's a simple one, is probably like my nan's curry chicken and like freshly made roti. Like it's like simple, delicious, home cooked food. And it's not, I've had like really amazing elaborate meals and, you know, like luxurious stuff and whatever. Actually, that's the stuff that makes me feel the most comforted.
What brings you peace?
I think I'm most at peace when I'm near to a body of water. Like I moved out of London and I live by a body of water, and I love being in water and being near water. But I think like watching the waves, watching the sun set on the sea, just being around it, being able to hear it, I find that really, I don't know, there's something about it that, yeah, makes me feel incredibly grounded. That, and I think being surrounded by people that I love, like family, my partner, and then being happy. But I think, and we've had a lot of loss and a lot of, so I really value moments when we're all just together and we're just happy. But I think, yeah, them and some water, gorgeous.
All right, so our game is called Rewriting the Classics. Classic is however you define it. Name one book you wished you would have written.
I don't even know if it's like I wish that I wrote it, but I just wish that I could articulate my grief in the way that this writer is able to articulate hers. So it's a book called Crying in H Mart, which I'm sure you know, but it's and it's like a beautiful exploration of grief. And so many people have been giving me books on grief, and they're all so fucking depressing. And as much as this book is sad and incredibly moving, it's actually really joyous and really complicated. And it's like reflecting on a relationship with a parent that is like imperfect, but also still so full of love. And for me, I don't know, the way that she writes that, and also the anchor being around like food and the relationship they have and the time that they would spend in the mall together, like trying all this stuff. I was like, oh my God, this is like, wow, moments that are making me feel things deeply, but it's not without the joy or the messiness, I think, that is true to grief. So I really appreciate it. I'm really grateful that she's written this gorgeous book, really.
Name one book where you want to change the ending, and how would you do it?
I'm like a serial non-finisher of books if I'm not feeling it. So I'm like,
so you want to change the middle.
so I just wouldn't have gotten there.
The last question for this section is, name a book that you think is overrated and why.
I mean, what is overrated? Maybe like The Power of Now is quite an overrated book. I feel like the self-help kind of guide. There we go.
That works.
I'm like, I don't want to go there.
Now I want to know the real answer. All right, my final question.
After this, we talk.
Okay. Final question for today. When you're dead and gone and among the ancestors, what would you like someone to write about the legacy of words and work that you've left behind?
Wow. I would want whoever is writing about me and my legacy and my work to reflect on the fact that everything I do is like rooted in love. I think that would be the key sentiment and the key message, because that is the thing that anchors all of the work that I do.
Big thank you to Liv Little for being here today on Black and Published. Make sure you check out Liv's debut novel, Rosewater, out now from Get Lifted Books. Yes, the imprint by John Legend. And if you're not following Liv, check her out on the socials. She's at Liv S. Little on Instagram. That's our show for the week. If you like this episode and want more Black and Published, head to our IG page. It's at Black and Published, and that's BLK and Published. There, I've posted a bonus clip from my interview with Liv about including queer history in her novel in the face of deliberate erasure in the States and the UK. Make sure you check it out and let me know what you think in the comments. I'll holler at y'all next week when our guest will be Kim Coleman Foote, author of the novel Coleman Hill.
I had so much jealousy, honestly. And I was like, this jealousy is not productive for me to write, because ultimately I have to just keep on writing, producing, improving my game. So I just basically like removed myself from that world, kind of really staying out of the mix and just keeping my head down. I was like, the only thing that you can control is what you put out. And I just kept coming back to, I had to ask myself constantly, like, why are you doing this? Why are you writing all this? And it was like, okay, I'm committed to telling the story.
That's next week on Black and Published. I'll talk to you then. Peace.